Digital radio.
Who knows most of the bits about it, I think, to tell us a bit more about the digital modes, including some history of them.
Yep.
Over to you, Liv. Thank you.
Okay, good evening everybody. So just a quick slide to introduce what digital modes are. So what they were originally machine-to-machine communications. It started back in the 1850s. Today it's basically computer to computer. There are hundreds of digital modes. And what I'm going to see tonight is just the popular, in brackets, amateur ones that are around. There are a load more other than you're going to see tonight. The reason there's a lot is it's based on the reliability of communication, propagation and speed. And some reasons why digital modes are probably popular. They work well with low power, they're bandwidth efficient, they break the language barrier, so that means anybody in darkest Mongolia can probably have an FT8 call with you, where wouldn't be able to have an SSB call. And also for the people with smaller gardens and less able to put big antennas up, they do work well in that situation. So let's start with the history. You could say that Francis Bacon, back in 1605, was the first person to use a 5-bit code to communicate. He basically took the alphabet, or 24 characters, he didn't do I's and J's or U's and V's, and converted them into 5-bit codes using A's and B's as the ones and noughts. So that was back in 1850. The first wireline activity was around in the 1850s when Mr. Bordock was around. If you start looking at when you could start picking up the first radio RTTY, that was around in the 1920s. The first air-to-ground one was in 1922, and I've actually got the next slide shows you the paper clipping out the New York Times, and also the picture of some of the equipment. So the first commercial RTTY service was 1930s, and then basically you jumped till after the war before there was any real amateur activity. And the first amateur RTTY that I could pick up on the web was in New York on HF. And interestingly, it used CW to send the characters, so it was carrier on, carrier off. The reason for that underneath is that in that time, the FCC didn't allow FSK on HF bands. Interestingly, it was allowed on 2 meters, so at the same time, they actually did RTTY using AFSK. So FSK is when you change the carrier frequency in line with the incoming data. AFSK is where you send an audio tone. And then, surprisingly, the first UK one I could pick up anywhere was in 1959. That seems quite late to me. But that was the first one I could pick up. That's also around the time then when the British Amateur Radio Teletype groups were set up as well. So that's really where the RTTY came from. So this surprised me. This popped out of Google. On the right is the ground equipment they used, and I'm sorry you can't read it, but on the left is actually the article which describes it. It doesn't really say a lot other than it was pretty good. Yeah. I don't think it's readable, is it? No.
It's just the resolution.
Yeah. But what's interesting is you can recognise the equipment on the right. You can see that if you look on the right-hand side, you can actually see the printing device. It looks like a typewriter. Because the radios look like radios, and the batteries look like batteries. Right. I nearly didn't put this slide in. This is really to show a timeline of how the digital modes expanded rapidly with coming along the computers and sound cards and DSP. So if you look back in the 1930s, the red, that's commercial type activity. You then come into the 1940s after the war, where you see the first hand RTTY. One of the reasons for that was basically during World War II, RTTY was used extensively by the news agencies, by the military, and after the war there was a lot of surplus terminals. Prior to the war, any terminals that were not in use, the companies that made them tended to take them back. They didn't put them onto the second-hand market. So pre-war, it was very difficult to get hold of a RTTY machine, which was probably one of the reasons that it was difficult for hams to actually make RTTY calls. You'll also see a thing called field hell hind there, which is hell writing. That is very different to any of those other modes, because the other modes you see up there are basically data modes where you're sending ones and noughts. The field hide actually is like a fax. It takes the character, breaks it down into a 7x7 matrix and sends a lot of little dots. So when you actually see it coming out on your screen, it's actually like an old-fashioned fax. It's still used today. 2 weekends ago, there was a field hide contest on the Sunday night, which was, I could hear some, but I didn't actually decode any.
So it's called Hellschreiber, isn't it?
Hellschreiber.
The same thing.
Yeah, Hellschreiber. Amtor came along with the style of the microprocessors. That started to bring in some of the FEC, forward error correction. Then you come into PACTOR, and then basically, as soon as you come into the sound card area in the DSP, you see the modes we talk about today: PSK, FSK, and a whole load of them. Now, these are the popular ones that I call them popular. That you see, there are a load of other ones, and each of these has a number of subsets. For example, JT65 has about 12 varieties. Domino up there has a load. Thor and Throb have 8 or 9 varieties, so there's a whole load of different mixes of those particular modes. They're all, the ones with JT in front are basically the ones which are the ones from Joe Taylor. So why do you need so many different ones? The reason is there's no compromised data mode. There's no mode which you could go out and you could plug in to your computer. You know, one afternoon do meteor scatter, another afternoon go on HF and use. They're all different. The conditions are so different. So you basically you're optimizing for noise, performance, and propagation. So for example, if you're on HF, you tend to get slow fading and shallow with noise. But if you're using it in VHF, for example, doing meteor scatter, aircraft, ionic spheric, which is short duration bursts of data, short duration propagation. So as you can see, it's no good having a data mode which is very slow and sending you information over 60 seconds and trying to use that for meteor scatter, because you won't get through. You need a faster mode that sends data faster for the faster fading modes and slower for the slower fading modes. This one probably, so this is what you can tweak, okay? So basically, at very, very high level, the top's basically saying you need to decide where you want to use your mode you're designing. Do you want it to do fast, deep modes or slow fading? You have to take into account the fading rate. Is it fast or slow? Multipath, sync requirements, and frequency stability. So those are the things you build into making the data mode for your particular use. And then the ones at the bottom are the things you can change. So you can either send a character by character. So you type it on the keyboard, it flies out over the air and comes out the other end. Or you can do block messaging, where you take a number of characters and you put them together and then you send them. If you do that, you can then do things like compression on them to make the number of bits you send smaller. You can put error correction in. And then you come through to the key ones at the bottom, really, which is the information throughput. How fast you want to go. Do you want to sit there for 60 seconds and get one character? Or do you want to get 24, 25 characters in a minute? The key ones there for the bandwidth are the modulation type. How are you going to modulate it? And how for the symbolic rate, that's a fancy word of saying how much information do you send in one piece of modulation. For example, a RTTY is one piece. Some of the JT modes go up to 3 pieces of information at one time. And then the synchronization method. That's important because if you have a data signal coming in, it's nice to know where the start of it is and where the end of it is. You don't want to be looking in the noise for something that's not there. So very, very simply, those are the things you tweak, and those are the things that are tweaked in the various modes that we've talked about. Very, very quickly, this is basically a few of the modes. If you look at the The top one, the RTTY, is basically very, very simple. It's just straightforward FSK or AFSK. There's no automatic repeat, there's no correction, there's no block characters. Then field Heils exactly the same, or Hellschreiber. Amtor came along in the 1978s using microprocessors, and that they had built in some error correction and some more functionality to get you better reliability. They had automatic repeat requests, which is basically you sent a character a couple of times. If you didn't receive it in the message in the correct format, you could go back to the sender and say send it again. So you'd send a character or two characters twice. Did you receive it? No. Send it again. If you received it okay, then you sent back, yeah, send me the next one. So as you've got the Amtor was very, very like a chirping sound, very hard on the transmitter and receivers because they were chopping in and out between transmit and receive very, very quickly. The board weight was basically about 100 boards for that. And then you've got Pactor came along, which was basically using ASCII and that. PSK introduced, that's where the famous waterfall came in with PSK. PSK, as you can see, is basically, it's the modulation that gives you the performance there. There's no real error correction or automatic repeat requests. So if you go down the interesting one, the next one down, Thor, is very interesting. Again, as you can see, it's got no error correction, no block characters, no automatic requests. It's called IFSK. And what that basically does is it sends data, the modulation, it sends data in 18 tones, but it doesn't measure the tone frequency as in FSK. It measures the difference in the tone frequencies. So the code is set up that if you send a character, you never get two frequency differences that are the same. It's called incremental frequency shift keying. And then you drop down into the MSKs, the multiple frequency shift keying modes. And they basically, you send a number of tones, basically in factors of 2. So you have the basic version has 2 tones. You can go to 2, 4, 6, 8, 16 tones. That gives you better throughput, better reliability as well. And then when you look at the JT woes, the ones with the block characters on the end, that's basically where you come into the really low noise, weak signal modes. The other one that's actually I should probably call out is MSK 144. That's a meteor scatter mode. So that's a fast mode. So that's sending data very quickly. And that is, I've got to read my list here. That's offset quadrature phase shift keel. I can't explain what that is. But just to say, right, okay. So the next slide. So that's basically the modes. If I'll show you later on PSK Reporter, most of those modes you saw on the previous slide, there is activity on. This is the software that's available around. I have not, as per the modes, there is numerous varieties of software. The ones in bold are really the ones that are probably the ones that most people use. So if you're just interested in RTTY, you probably want to use MMTTY or two-tone. Two-tone, I think, is used by the contesters. That's seen as one of the best RTTY decoders around. FL Digi, that does most of the non-JT modes. That's free of charge. Works very well. Integrates to M1NN if you use it for contests. DM 780, that's part of Ham Radio Deluxe. There is a free version of that floating around, but it's a very old version. Then you've got the Mix W. That's Eastern European. It does most of the non-European, most of the non-JT modes. It's also got FT8 in it. I think it's not based on the Joe Taylor's group code. I think it's basically picking up its own code. Then you've got the WSJT and WSJTX. Those are basically the JT modes. In Europe, MSHV is used for the JT modes, mainly on VHF and UHF. Couple of reasons for that. One of them is, and I'll show you in a minute, that for the contesting, MSJTX doesn't have all the modes that are used. whereas MSHV is all in one package. And also, apparently, some of the Europeans don't like the GUI that's involved in the JSTX. They prefer the MSHV. I find MSHV much more difficult to use. And then you've got a couple of other independent ones for which do FT8. That's JTDX and JT65HF. They basically use the JT code. I think there's actually a typo in there. I think that should be JT10, not T10. I've missed that one out, so apologies for that. So if you're going to start on FT8 or any of the digital modes, probably FLDigi and WSJT are the way to go. Okay, so if you're interested in viewing any of these modes, this weekend there is a Russian activity day stroke contest which is going to use Contessa 4, Thor 11 and Thumb 4 frequencies, modes. And those are the frequencies that are good. It's basically all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Probably the best place to look for those will be in that portion of the 20 metre band, the 14072 to 14080 is probably where you'll see those the most. But if you are interested in listening to them, they should be activity this weekend. Right, FT8. Okay, so FT8 stands for Franke-Taylor Design 8-Tone FSK. Inventors Steve Frank and Joe Taylor. It was introduced for alpha testing in June 2017. It's designed for short duration, weak but steady opening. So don't expect to do meteor scatter with it. It's there for, as it says, short duration, slow fading openings. It's based upon JT65, where JT65 is used, that's almost the general purpose data mode, if there ever was one such thing. It's used on HF, and it's used on EME, Moon Bounce activity. It's based on 15-second transmit and receive windows. The QSO you have is predefined. It's a minimum QSO. There's a number of fixed messages. It basically is 13 characters per slot. So it sends 13 characters in each of those 15-second slots. Its JT65 is about -30 below the signal, below the noise sensitivity. FT8 is somewhere between 4 to 6. So it's around -24, -25. Uses a very narrow bandwidth, just under 50 hertz, and you can see the message structure down the bottom. Now, if you look at this, the message structure, let's try the pointer. So this bit is your information that you're sending the message. This bit, cyclic redundancy check, that's basically there. That's a clever mass polynomial expressions to give you a bit count, which tells you whether you got this number right. And you've got the parity check, FEC. These 87 bits here. They will actually are used to correct the information bits and the CRC to get it right. So basically, what happens is this comes along. You use this bit to correct these bits. Then you use this bit to check that bit's right. Right? It's not quite as simple as that. There's another bit in this as well. You've got to know when you start and stop the message, right? So when you set your FT8 up, you set it up to has to be within 2.5 seconds, yeah? When you set it up on your computer to run it. Actually, when the software does it, in this message here, there's timing information, and the software actually gets the start and the middle and end of the message to 20 milliseconds. There's a thing called Costa arrays, which I don't understand, are in there, which actually allow the software to actually determine when the message starts, where the message in the middle is, and where the message ends. Because it has to be accurate, because it doesn't want to be going and finding information in a load of noise when it's not there. Okay. So software packages, this is basically what you get in FSJT/X modes. You can basically see, if you look at you basically get FT8, you get JT4, it's used for EME. If you want a real challenge, there's a Chinese lunar orbiter going around at the moment, around the moon, and that actually uses a version of JT4 for its telemetry back to Earth. So the Japanese amateurs are actually decoding that, or were decoding that. I'm not sure they still are, because I think it's developed a fault on its synchronization. But they were using that mode and JSJT to actually decode that. JT9 is used for propagation spatter on GTF modes. It's also used on HF. JT65 was originally developed for EMEA. It was found to work really well on HF as well. Next one is basically QRA64, that's used for EMEA. Next one is MSK144, BTS scatter. It works really well. It's very fast, it's a fast mode, so it sends in the message a number of times in the 15-second window. But it's fairly active in Europe. I mean, I was doing that on Sunday morning, and I did 9 contacts in about 45 minutes. There was plenty of rocks falling out the sky, which helped. But yeah. And then the last one is ISOCAP, which is used, you see that in the competitions on Tuesday nights, people use that for aircraft scatter. And the last one's an echo mode, where you can basically send a radio signal to the moon and see it coming back if you've got the good enough aerials and receiver. The other JSJT10, these are the modes that basically you don't get. You get all these in, or most of these in MSHV, the European software. But these top JTMS, FSK441 and JT6M are the ones that you see on 6 meters and also on 2 meters, particularly when there's a competition on in Europe. The other thing you can basically see is if you look at the baud rates, if you look at the throughput here for JT65, which is a slow HF mode, that's 25.25 cycles, characters per second. These meteor scatter modes are much, much faster. And then you've got JT4 at the bottom again. Okay, so let me now flash up. Right, so this is, if you load WSJT/X, this is what you basically get up as a screen. In this area here, this is basically what you get coming in from your receiver. This is all the decodes, right? This is the level that you have to set for the audio level into the program, into your computer. You want this to be around somewhere between the 30 to 60 mark. I think the documentation talks about, some places talks about 30, other talks about 60, but basically in the 30 to 60 range. The only way you set that level is by using your computer record input. So you have to go into the Windows, into the actual device and change the level to set that level there. This window is where you have your activity, your messaging backwards and forwards. You have this. This sets the frequency. If you've got cat control running, this sets the frequency of the, I'll use the pointer actually, this sets the frequency of what you're running on your receiver. If you put that down, you see it's basically got, the program has built in all the FT8 frequencies. The little green light tells you cat's working well. This one tells you the frequency you're on. This is date and time, obviously. To set it up, you go into settings. Very, very similar to when I did the Whisper setup. You basically put in your call sign, your location, and that's basically all. You tick the majority of the boxes. I like a line between my decoding periods. I like distance in miles. Putting your transmit messages in the RX window, then you show the countries. You probably only want to tick this one here, which is double click on calls when you to enable it. And then if you work in VHF, you do need to click that one. The radio You should, with the newer versions of this, only be able to have to put your radio in, the COM port it's on, and what you've got it set up to, leave these other ones on default, and then you press test cat, and that goes green if the cat's working. That's how it should work, okay? And then for PTT, if you're using cat, you just click cat there, and you can test the PTT. Now, the other one here, which is important, is the split mode, all right? You do want to be using split mode, and I've got a slide on that in a minute, and we'll go into a little bit more detail into what split mode is. But you really do want to be running split mode. And then the other one is basically you need to set your sound cards there. If you've got a sound card in your transceiver, that will show up there, and you need to click those two. That should be basically, the other thing you have to do is basically go into reporting, and I would highly advise, if not it's essential, you click enable PSK reporting spotting, because that enables you to put your spots up onto the web automatically. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as well. And then there's also an M1N logger enabled as well. Configurations, if you've got multiple configurations, you can, two radios for example, you can set configurations up, so all you do is you go in here and you can load one or the other, which radio you've got plugged in. View, there is a waterfall. The only one I really use here is the waterfall graph. That's not going to show, is it? This is not a good one, but see that basically shows you the bandwidth of your received audio coming out of your receiver, right? The little green is your receiver slot, and the red is where you're transmitting. So when you run split, you can actually, as you can see, you could receive in one place and transmit in another, all right? Now the idea when you're running split is you find a nice clear spot on here, because this is not a busy spot. During the day on 20 meters, this will be orange most of the way across. If you're in the middle here, your signal has probably little chance of getting through. You probably want to be split up on one of these ends. The other thing when you're running split is you want to tick this box as well, which says hold TX frequency. So what that means is the RX could go anywhere across the band, but the TX frequency stays solid at one place where you've set it. Next one is the modes. There's all the modes. You just click on which one you want, and if you click on a different one, wasn't quite right. If you click on a different one, let's go JT65. You'll see the frequency automatically. It will automatically change the frequency for you. Right, decodes. That's the wrong one. Let's go back to the other one. FT8. The decode button. There's basically 4 modes of decodes, and I've got a couple of slides I'll show you in a minute. The fast is a fast mode. It was originally thought if you had a slow computer or you had a lot of traffic, that would do a very quick look through and decode, wouldn't do a really deep decode into the data. So that's like a quick and fast decode. Normal decode is where you should normally be, where that's basically goes through it, does a full decode. Deep is an interesting decode, because what deep does is it looks at the last 3 slots you've had in, and it tries to match pieces of data together to come up with a message, one of the pre-formed messages. So it's very good sometimes, and also it's very bad because it can get it quite wrong. And I can show you a little bit of that. But basically it's an advantage. Now the last one, enable AP, that's priority decoding, and as we've said, there's a number of set messages which we'll go through in a minute. So basically, you've basically got 5, is it 5? 1, 2, 6 messages that you're going to send if you're transmitting or receiving. And what the AP mode does is it knows it's expected to see one of those 6 messages. So if you, for example, if you take this message here, this is me replying to another station. it knows my call sign is going to be in that message. Right? So it says, I know where your call sign should be in that message, so I'll fill that bit in as if I know that bit. And then it'll try and work out the rest of it. It actually tags it and puts it up when it's doing that. So again, it's good, but not as good as it sometimes can be very misleading. Save is it's just straightforward. It allows you to save your decoded files or just to save every piece of audio that comes in WAV files. So this saves anything you've decoded. This just saves everything. And then the tools don't really use any of these at all, but they're basically ways of of calibrating the frequency, etc., and then help. There's just the help menus and some local user guides, offline user guides. And also there's the short keys. I won't go through those. Along the bottom, basically, you can log the QSO. It logs it into an ADIF file for you. Stop is it just stop monitoring, or you monitor. Monitor is when you actually try to decode. You're monitoring the audio that's coming in. Why don't I just load a file in? I can show you that. So if I just load a WAV file in. So all I've done there is I've taken a WAV file that I've had and loaded it in. So as you can see, you get various colours here for the contacts. It knows if you've worked it before. For example, if I'd worked that station before, that wouldn't be purple, that would be green background. If that country I hadn't worked it before, that would be a dark purple. If it was a message to me, it would be red in that window. Erase just decodes the message. Decode clicks on and off as it's decoding the message. Enable TX. So if I click on one of these CQs, what that basically does, as you can see, it fills the messages in for me in the correct format, yeah? It puts this up here, and then when I transmit, if it's going to transmit, it's not going to transmit. Oh, there it goes. You can see it sending the message, and you can hear the message going out. If you hit that one off, it doesn't stop the transmitter immediately. It just won't enable it in the next sequence. If you hit this one, it stops it immediately. So if you're in the transmit window and you're transmitting and you want to kill your transmitter, you have to hit halt. And tune, all tune basically does is, as you can hear there, it puts a tune out so you can actually tune your antenna up and all that, but it puts it out at full power. There's no reduced power. And this one here sets your power level. Now the way you set the power is exactly the same as with when I talked about WS Whisper. Basically, you slide this up and down, you look at your transceiver's power output, you turn up this, which is basically turning up the audio output level until your transmit power stops going up, and then you back it off a little bit. That should mean that the ALC in your transceiver is not actually being used, because you don't want the ALC coming in. As I said, these are the preform messages. You can either click on these to move the message up and down if you want to do that manually, or you can actually click on the button. This button here auto sequences. Now, because FT8 is very quick, so somebody sends you a message, that message actually only lasts for just over 13 seconds. You have 2 seconds for your computer to decode it, then you have another second and a bit, getting towards 2 seconds to decide whether you're going to actually reply to it. That's too short in terms of actually flicking through the messages. So this auto sequence button, and what that does is, as long as you've started the call, either responded to a CQ, or somebody has responded to a CQ to you, it will auto sequence. It will go through these messages automatically for you. So you don't have to press any more buttons. At the end of the CQ, at the end of the QSO, the enable TX light will go off, and then you click on the next one. Call first, that's basically for when you are CQing, and that basically takes, linked with auto, so it takes the first call that comes in and answers it, Okay, so if you get 3 or 4 people coming in, it'll take the first one in the list that comes through. I'll answer that call.
Would this be all on CW rather than on phone?
This is all on. It's all on data using SSB.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not speech.
Not speech. No. So these 2 buttons here basically allow you to either check. But you remember the little bars, the little green bar, the red bar, which were the transmit and the frequency. This enables you to either move the transmit to the receive to the transmit, or the transmit to the receive if you want to set them. And these are basically the audio tones that you're transmitting an audio tone of that. This is what you're listening to. And these pieces here are basically, as you notice, when I clicked on this got filled in automatically. Is there anything else I need to say on that? I think I've covered it. Oh, yes, the menu button here. If you don't want the menus at the top, you can turn them off, you can get rid of them. And there's also a button here which says CQ only. So if you don't want the jug, you just want the CQs to show, you can do that. So that very simply, oh, hang on. This one here is basically receive, but this receive, it's green if it's receive. If you're transmitting, it goes red. Oh, it goes yellow, sorry, yellow. It goes red. There's a thing in, which is a useful function. I forgot to mention this to you. If you go back to general, there's a thing called a TX watchdog timer. This is very useful because if you're like me, you sometimes get distracted when a call's in progress. You walk out the room, it's going, and you forget to switch it off. If you get a situation where you haven't got you don't get an answer, your program will keep sending the same message time and time again. What the watchdog timer does is it says, if I don't see any mouse or keyboard input to the program for 5 minutes, I'll switch it off. So it switches off the TX. So I think when you first load this in, you'll find this number's probably 20 minutes or so. 6? Yeah, I cut mine down to 5. So basically, whatever happens, if I do get distracted or I leave the room or whatever, it doesn't sit there continuously blasting out. So you do want that to be enabled in a small number. I think that's it. Right, let's go back to the presentation. So these are the typical exchanges. This side here is what you would expect to see. This is what you see from some of the more sloppy Eastern Europeans. So basically, you send the CQ out, you respond with your call sign. Oh, I've done that wrong. No, sorry. JT, sorry. I'm CQing. J1KT is responding to me. He's sending my call sign with his call sign and where his location. I go back with his signal strength. He comes back with, yes, received that. This is your signal strength. I go back with RRRs. That got all of that. He goes back with a 73, and I go back with a 73. Okay. I've messed that up. No, I haven't messed it up. That's right. Yeah. So on this side, basically, what you get is sometimes they come back to you. They don't give you the locator. They just give you a signal strength report. You go back with the auto sequence. The auto sequencer then will go back. They will go back with the signal report. So you receive that signal report, and then they come back with. They come back with either R73, or they come back with RRR. I find this really infuriating because they come back with R, and then that's the end of the conversation. I like to get a 73 to know I've had a complete QSO. The other thing you can sometimes get is, rather than, you sometimes get, rather than the RNR coming back, you sometimes get the RNR R73 coming back. Okay, that's a legitimate to end it, rather than going RNR and then a 73. And you can't see that, can you? That's basically the call. So you can basically see this was an evening on 6 metres in the summertime. The band was very quiet. I just went up to the international band on 6 metres on FT8, and I basically got Joe Taylor, the guy that designed FT8. But you can see the colours there. You can see the basically the reds are where they are talking to me. The greens are those I've had to talk to previously, and the purple ones.
You can set those colours yourself, can't
You can set those colours yourself. Yeah. If you want to change the colours, you can change the colours. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. What am I doing? Okay. Right, split mode. Okay, as I said to you, it's probably, you should use it if possible. The reasons you need to use, it used to be set, as I showed you in the setup of the radio tag, as fake or rig. If it's fake, the software program changes the frequency. If it's rig, then it uses your VFO-A and VFO-B. You need to lock the TX frequency once you've used it. The reason you want to use it is because basically it puts your signal into an area on the band that could be quite quiet, or looks to be quiet in your location. May not be quiet anywhere else, but at least it's not in all the other junk that you're seeing in the middle with all the other signals, one on top of the other. It's also used to minimise interference by keeping the TX phone near to the middle of the, oh, I didn't realise I've done that, audio frequency. So what I'm saying there is, if you put your TX frequency, so you're sending an audio and you're on 50.313, right, as in here, say if you're in the middle of the audio band, here you are, yeah? This is the frequency where you've got your little red box set in the middle of your waterfall, right, 50.3. The dial on the transmitter stays at 513. You're actually sending out a tone. If you set it at 50, what you will actually see is your transceiver drop down to a frequency of 50.3115, because it's actually keeping it in the audio frequency in the 1.5 to 2K audio band. And the reason it does that is, if you remember from your theory, it's F1 plus F2. So you could get audio harmonics. If you put it out a 500 hertz signal, you mix that with a carrier, you get a load of audio harmonics. So it's reducing those by keeping it in the middle of the band. So don't be surprised when you're using split mode to see your receiver, your transmitter frequency jumping about. Okay. Talking about bag signals, here you can see some. There's one here. Look, he's going all over the place. Right, this is one signal, drifting. There's one here drifting. This one, God knows where he's going. Yeah. So it's important you have a stable TX. This is 2 meters. Yeah, this is 2 meters. It's very difficult to see them on bad signals on HF because they're so busy. They're all linked to one another. You just get a solid lines in the middle there. I hope you can see this. So this is a bad decoding. Can you see that? You probably can't. Yeah. So basically, here, this red here is I'd been sending out CQs. I got a response which came in which said me, M0IEP, and then I got a call sign E28 MNH in EJ03. Right? So I thought, whoopee, wonder what that one is. So I went back to him, and then when I was going back to him, I thought, oh, that looks a bit strange. And then I should have realised there's this question mark and A2 up there, which you can all see. if you remember I said about priority AP decoding, the A2 means it's a reply to a C2, a reply to a CQ message, right? And it's thought it's decoded it, but because if it thought it was good, it wouldn't have a question mark in front of it. So as it's got a question mark in front of it, it's no good, and it doesn't send it out to a PSK report or anything, right? So, like I said, you can see some bad examples. Like you get fooled by it. Actually, that locator is off the Pacific coast of South America. And God knows where the call sign is. TX slot operation. As I said, as we talked about, there are basically you have a transmit slot and a receive slot. They're basically synchronized to the start every 15 minutes every 15 seconds in a minute. So the first slot, the even slots go from 00 to 0 to 0 to 15, odd 15 to 130, odd even again from 30 to 45 and 45 to 60, and then you start again. On HF, it probably doesn't really matter which slot you're in. You don't, I mean, I get zero interference from anybody at home. I don't know if I cause people interference, but nobody's told me I have. However, it's a different story on VHF and UHF. So basically the convention is, because if you've got a local station and you've got another station trying to listen in the same slot, you get a lot of interference in that. You can't get the good DX. So basically the convention is on UHF and VHF, if you're beaming north or west, you should be basically using evens. If you're beaming south or east, you should be using the odd slots. In the UK, the local convention we use around here is odd slots, yeah?
Evens.
No, sorry, evens. No.
Receive on odd.
I've done it. I've made a mistake. We didn't realise that. It's slot number 2. It's odds. It's slot number 2.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yes. Sorry. Yeah, I was right. Yeah. It is the odd slot, so it's the plus 50.
We receive on the first slot.
Yeah, we receive on the first slot.
Transmit on the second,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
even.
Like I said, you don't need to worry about this. Yeah. So it gets interesting as you start getting towards the north when you swap from one to the other. But basically, but like I said, only if you use it on VHF. Come on. Fox and Hounds mode. So in the latest version of FT8, there's a Fox and Hound marks with DXpeditions. So basically, the Fox is the expedition station. The Hound is all the people trying to make a contact with him. And the way this works is you get you find the frequency for what the DX expedition is working on, and you dial that into your transceiver. The software, I forgot to show you, but I'll show you how you configure this in the software. The software then works out that the Fox, the DX station, only transmits on frequencies between 300 and 900 hertz. It can transmit up to 5 carriers. All the rest of them, everybody else, is in the range 1K to 4K. So you set it up. Basically, you see that you set the frequency up. You see it in the transmit window, in the receive message window. You click on it. It goes away, fires off, and then eventually it goes through, makes a call, comes back, and you get a very short message from the Hound coming back with the responding to your call, and that's the end of it. You will see your frequency move a little bit because if you don't get a reply from the Hound, it moves your frequency a few 300 hertz. So, for example, if you send it in and you don't get an answer, it doesn't. But then if it comes back and you don't answer it, it works very well. I mean, I've done it on 2 DXpeditions. I think one was in Kosovo, and I'm not sure where the other one was. And it was quite boring, actually. I looked on the web, dialed the frequency up, configured it, pressed the button, and sat there for 5 minutes. It did it, and that was it. So I'm not sure how exciting that was. So to set the Fox and Hounds mode, you go into settings, you go to advanced, and there we go. Yep, Fox. You don't need to bother about any of these. This lot here, as I did with a WAV file, you can actually put noise into your WAV file to degrade it. All right. Okay, so that's very basics of FT8. So PSK Reporter. So I think this is a very powerful tool. It's basically a data app on the web. It's basically a GUI, a map of the world, which displays the spots from everybody who reports them from their data program. It's things like FLDigi, WSJT, MSHV, they all have an option to put spots up onto the web. Very, very similar to what you get with Whisper, but much, much faster. So you can see your coverage, you can check your antennas are working, you can see what the propagation's doing, and it's helpful for DXing. For example, if you're receiving, like I was 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was getting some of the FT8 in from some of the Pacific Islands. I could receive them. I was trying to go back to them, but when I actually looked at them on PSK Reporter, they weren't receiving me, so I just gave up and didn't bother. So basically, PSK Reporter, when you flash it up for the first time, this is the website. If you put PSK Reporter into Google, you get this website. You basically have, along the top, you have which band you want to work on, which one band you want to look at, whether you want to look at signals or countries, send, receive, or just sent or received by, your call sign, the country and origin of your call sign, your grid square or anybody, your call sign, and then the mode you want to look at, and over what period. So for example, if I want to look at FT8, from me on 20 meters, and because I know the band's gone down, don't say that country of origin, let's go to the call sign and make this 12 hours. What you actually get up eventually is basically all the contacts, all the people that have received my signal or whose signal I've received in the last 6 hours, 12 hours. That's actually not very impressive. that's not necessarily a good one. Some days you get a lot better than that. You also get along here, it tells you when my signal was last heard, whether it's going to be refreshed. There's that number of transmitters. It says I've done 2,847 reports and 78 countries in the last 24 hours, or over the last week, because I've been away, so it's only basically been on the last 24 hours. How many countries I've done the last week, the number of active monitors there are. You can also do display options. So for example, if I wanted to see my signal strength rather as well, I can do that. You have to press go again, and that will give you the reports that everybody saw. If I want to look at, say, more details, say, of one of these people, you click on it and it gives you the details, where he is, the range, where he is, the range, what software he's using. That's sometimes quite useful as well. You can click on him, and guess what? He goes into, you actually look at what he's receiving. So he's only a receive station. He hasn't transmitted anything in the last 12 hours. And that's very useful to you, because basically, if I'm sitting in the UK and I can see he's receiving me, I think, oh, I might want to try and talk to him, right? But it's no point, because he's not been active. You know, he's not as if he's been transmitting in the last while at all. So he's probably not sitting there. He's probably got an unattended receiver just sitting there. Because basically with FT8, if you leave your receiver on the FT8 frequency, you leave your program, your code program running, it'll upload the spots whether you're there or not.
In fact, I'm monitoring JS8 on 40 metres at the moment.
Yeah.
So if you put the parameters in, it'll show what you found.
Okay, so I could do that, I suppose. Yep.
JS8.
JS8. 40.
On my course,
Is it G4? So that's what you're seeing.
Probably, yeah.
So the other thing that's very useful on this program is, for example, this is mainly, if you want to go and say for example, it was the middle of the day and you wanted to see whether there was any activity, any propagation on 15 metres. So you put 15 metres in, you'd put send and receive, you change the call sign to the country of origin of the call sign. So that's looking at all the call signs being reported in the UK. You'd probably change that to all modes, and then you'd hit 15, you'd get go. If there'd been any activity, you'd have seen the flags. What this shows you is the reporting stations, but actually there's no activity there. It's very useful, for example, on 2 metres. For example, if you were on the VHF and you wanted to see what the propagation was like from the UK to this evening, then you can put that in as well. For example, there's basically no propagation to it. If I actually open this up, because I think earlier on, I can't do that, but earlier on, there was propagation into Poland and that from 2 metres. There won't be anything. I don't think there'll be anything on 6 metres. Or 6. It was just. There's somebody. G7RAU has actually heard this Italian in the UK on FT8 this evening. I think that's all. So, because this is very powerful. The other thing that's as useful actually is if you put the active monitors up on 6 metres, you forget the frequency, what you need to be using. You can actually go in there and you can see that actually this guy's on MSK 144, he's on 50.280. There's another guy there on FT8. You do have to be a little bit careful because these frequencies are the last frequency plus the audio. So if you've got 315, you have to know it's 313. But that gives you a way of, if you go looking at what you want to try doing, you can actually go around and see what frequencies everybody's using if you've for different modes. Just as a matter of interest, if I go down here to system statistics, come on. So that's not going to work. So what that basically does is a load of statistics, and you can actually go back and look at in the last couple of hours what modes and how many people have been using those modes. There we go. So that's the number of reports that have been going up. As you can see, what's that? 600,000. Number of active monitors is always about 3.5. Yeah. Number of active transmitters, top monitors in the different countries. Here we go, the modes. So this is basically over the last 2 hours. This is the modes And as I said to you, some of those is surprising. Some of these modes, Opera's in there, Ross is in there, Olivia, PSK. There is activity on a number of the modes, different modes. Right, I think that's all I was going to say on JT Reporter. And then this is basically how I use it. I have the waterfall at the top, WSJT there, and then I have JT Reporter on my screen. This is one signal, by the way. It's another bad signal. And by the way, if anybody knows what this is, on 6 meters, it's a continuous signal that's there all the time. I don't know what it is. So JT Alert, this is one of the other tools that you can plug into WSJT. Basically what it is it's a way of alerting you to QSOs that you might want to make. So you can basically set it up to let you know if it's a new grid, a new call sign, a new DXCC, a new zone, a new continent, and various other things. It also automatically uploads your QSOs to various online databases. What else does it do? The other thing it does has a messaging facility. So you actually, if you are online and your QSO is online, he can actually send you a message, which has happened to me several times. And it also enables you has an easy way of actually putting messages into FT8 and WSJT. This is what it looks like when it's fully operational. So basically this is it here. So it shows you all the call signs that are basically coming into WSJT. The green means basically they were looking for a CQ. It tells you the country they're in. And it also highlights them. A green means I've actually worked, I think green means I've actually worked that country. I think if I've got that set up correctly. But basically there's different colours here for if you've worked them before, if you want to work them, if they're a new DXCC, etc., etc. Let's not go there yet. Let's just go there. I will give you a quick demonstration of that. Too many windows open.
It's great if you've got visitors in the shack, because they keep asking you, where is that station? What does that call sign mean?
So basically, yes. There we go. So basically, well, it goes away again. But basically, it flashes, puts them up here. I changed some stuff in the database in the setup of JT Alert last night, and I can't keep the frequencies there, the call signs. I don't know what I've changed.
Well, they go off after 15 seconds anyway.
So anyway, that's basically what it does. If you look at what you could get alerts for, there's any number of different things. The settings. If you go into settings, Oh. Every time you do anything, it always goes and reads the database. You can go in and set any number of these different things that you want. If you go to login, these are the databases that it will log to. So, what else is there? I think that's about it. And then also the applications it works with, how you want it to work with the applications. I suppose I should untick that. So it's quite a powerful tool. Now the other thing that it's got, if I can, is this micro window. So basically if I put message 1, message 2. So if I want to I do have, there is in WSJT, there is a freehand window. So if I click on one of these messages, it will put the message in there for me. So I can send it out. So this freeform window enables you to do that by putting messages in here. You can, the other way that you can do this, if you have to use the WSJT method, is you go into TX micros and you put message 4 in there and you add it. Message 5, add. And then when you, and then when you come here, you can see the messages you put in here. But this allows you to put in a number of messages. So you could almost have a conversation with this very easily. The other way of doing it is quite clumsy. You can actually type in here as well. Actually, the other thing I didn't show you was actually if you change into the, as you see, if you double click on this, you can actually change that message to give you the RR73 message as opposed to the RRR.
What are the different tabs for then? There's 3 tabs there.
Where? These ones?
No, the tabs.
On the tab. So basically that's just another layout of the same messages. So this is what basically the same messages in a different format. So this is basically what happens when you see Q. This is basically what you have for answer. And this one is... I can't... Yes, it's set in the slots and all that for... Have I got... I didn't set... I didn't... I'm not sure what that one does, actually. I'm not sure what that one does. It got me there.
Those are the pre-assigned compressed messages that you can use to reduce the length of your message sent.
Right. I never use that, but yeah. So I think that's basically JT Alert. I don't use it very much at all, but it is useful. Let me go back to the other tool that you might find, particularly, this is a tool that's basically used on UHF, VHF. It's the ON4KT chat room. So if you put ON4KT into Google, it comes up with a chat room. It's basically used on those bands for setting up QSOs. On contest nights, it's extremely busy. It flashes through because apparently it's legal to actually advertise what frequency you're CQing on. Right, it's allowed. And you can actually call for people to make contacts, and a lot of the big stations, particularly into the continent, set up QSOs that way. So it's basically you can do it via a web browser. There's a number of clients. There's one called KST4B, which you've got to send. If you download that, you have to email the guy to actually give you a license, but it comes back fairly quickly. And there's the website. This is just me using the KS4KT. This was a meteor scatter contact I was doing some weeks ago with a guy in Switzerland. And as you can see, I was trying to get him for a number of the rocks stopped falling out of the sky. And we were trying to complete the QSO. He came to me and said, "Do you want to still keep going?" And I basically said, "No, it's okay."
What sort of power are you getting on area you're running on?
So I'm running a 5-element Yagi, and I'm running somewhere between 50 to 100 watts. Well, talking about that, I had at the weekend, one of the guys I had a contact with swore blind he was using the wire dipole with me in Germany, right? So, like I said, MSK 144 works a treat. If we've got time at the end, I'll just show you that. If you go through the web interface, this is basically what you see. You get a window with all the chat in it. You get a more like a frequency spotted window, and then you get This is the bit that's really cheating. You get the location of the guy, right? So in here somewhere, there's a CQ. There we go. You can see the guy calling CQ for the contest and his frequency. So all you basically need to do is, you know his call sign, you know his locator, you only actually need to write down his signal strength and serial number. And that's apparently not cheating.
Can you log that automatically?
Yeah.
I went down the shop and found I'd run the competition.
Yeah. The other application is a thing called JS8 call. There was a thing called FT8 call, but Joe Taylor wanted it changed. So basically, this is JT8 call. This is basically a QSO mode using FT8 transport layer. So what it basically does in its simplistic form is you type in 3 text messages up to about 15 characteristics, and then they send them in the FT8 slot. So if you send a message, say, of doing the maths simply, sort of like 39 characters, it will send it in 3 FT8 time slots, one after the other. The guy that receives it at the other end, the good news is the guy at the other end, they actually decode them as you go along. So if you ask a guy a question, or 2 or 3 questions, he can actually be typing in his response after he's received the first 15-second message. It's downloadable from the web. There's a short message function for typical information. So for example, the macros that you use on other programs for telling about your station information, your location, and the other information that you want, there's basically short messages. So you don't have to type in a long message, you can put in a short character. It sends it. There's a beacon mode. Now, as of this morning, they've changed the beacon mode to heartbeat mode. And the idea of the beacon mode was that it fires off a beacon every fixed period of time, which you can set to actually, so I'm available to make a call, have a conversation with you. And then there's a message relay function, and by that you can basically send a message through another station that's online to a third party. Why do you want to do that? I'm not 100% sure. But basically it has that functionality. So I'm a bit disappointed you can't. So basically what you set up with is, this just basically says your receiver's on. There's a tune button there, exactly the same as previously. If you want to spot the call, if you want to log the call, this beacon has now changed to heartbeat. Oh, well, let's go back. You'll see up here, there's a time of the next beacon going off. There's an automatic answer button there, a cell call, so you can basically call your friend, and then there's a halt button. This window basically has everything that's coming in on the receiver bandwidth. This window is where you type in your messages. This is the conversation you're having, and this is all basically the beacons. And you have a CQ button. Actually, let me just put the program up, because that will come up easier. You can read it better now. So this is where the beacons. So for example, if I do a CQ, you just press the CQ button, that pops it in there, and as you can see, it's sending it.
So there's no time slot, it just sends.
It sends it in an FT8 time slot.
Oh, right, there it goes, yeah.
Oh, let's turn that off. It's all synchronized exactly the same as FT8. So the QTH basically is, there's a message, as you can see, that's sending that message in 4 time slots. So that's a minute's worth. Very similar as before, that's where the receiver, the input is into the receive level, tells you CAT's working, transmit level, and then basically the waterfall. As I said, that's now changed to heartbeat. There's the auto button there. What else have I missed? So you can just basically see the messages going out. This is all setting up. It's all very similar to. You'll see how this looks very, very similar to what you've got on JTS, WSJT. Yep. All very similar. Sounds a good idea, but actually it's extremely tedious. That message was basically a minute to go out, and then the guy at the other end's got to send you one back. If it's not a canned message and he types it in, it takes a bit of time. And even a simple QSOs take 10 minutes. Right, let me just show you one last thing. Let's get rid of some of this. Got too many windows. So just quickly, before I go on to the last slide, meter scatter, which is MSK144. If I put a file in, let's go up. Actually, let me do that again, so I'll get rid of that. You remember I was saying to you about if you do meter scatter, you want to send the message lots of times fairly quickly. This is basically a message from a guy in Germany, right, to me. It's done by meter scatter. This number here is the signal strength. This number here is when in the 15 seconds it appeared. And if you go up the top here, you can just see the coming. It's a very short duration message. If it had been FT8, for example, you'd have to send 13 seconds worth of message or something approaching that to get the message through. The MSK144 is basically lots of messages, one after the same message, one after the other in the block. So it actually takes into account the propagation. And if you remember back to the beginning, I said various modes, various propagation modes, you need various different digital modes. This is just an example of that.
Do you know which shower it was?
No, I should do, but I can't remember. I know the last shower was very disappointing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The
But-
one in August was very good at this.
Yes, yeah.
That was always good.
Yeah, but this one was quite disappointing. But I do find that it actually works. I'm not 100% convinced that all the time it's meter scatter. I think I get some aircraft and some other stuff coming through, because most nights you could get something through. I mean, if you
I found I had to run about 300 watts on 6 meters before it really worked.
I'm on 100 watts and it works.
But I was getting sort of at 300, I was getting all over the place.
Yeah, but it's worth having a go at. Right, now the bad news, or the good news, or the bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. So basically, this is the in December when they release WXJT/X version 2, you have to upgrade, because basically they've introduced a new version of FT8 which has got more bits into it, right? And MSK144 as well. The reason they've done that is basically they've put contesting format into it. So, for example, they're all getting very excited in the US because in the ARL RTTY Roundup, you can actually use FT8 this year. There seems to be quite a lot of excitement about it. I can't really think why, because it must be incredibly slow. So basically, if you're not running, if you try and talk with the new version, the 2.0 version, with one of the 1.x versions, it will not work. Right, so you have to upgrade as soon as that one is released. So there'll be chaos
There is a two out at the moment, isn't there? It's a beta version.
There's beta versions out at the moment, and they have the ability to switch between the two.
Closes on November the 3rd, isn't it?
Yeah. But they've had a lot of. I've tried running the blue versions. They're a bit buggy, and they have the ability. The pre-release versions have the ability to switch between one or the other. But basically, as of December the 10th, when that's released, if it is then, you must upgrade. Okay, and then of course, come January, you can all have a go in the RTTY roundup competition, which I think could be interesting. I think that was it. If there's any questions.
Should we go like somebody else? Just press the button. Just press the button.
Just press the Well, having actually had one FT8 QSO at last, having lots of problems setting the thing up, I've actually understood some of that. So, who's actually uses FT8? And I mean, there's a few. Yeah, the biggest trouble I had was getting it set up right. There's lots of little hidden things that I couldn't find, but it seems to make sense. Now, anybody got any questions?
Just as an open question, I've not dealt with it for a long time. What's happened with packet?
What's happened to packet?
Yeah.
Well, it's still around, some of it, isn't it? I think G1YGY still runs packet node, and there's still some around.
Right.
The packet node is 2 meters, 4 meters. 77 still, if you listen around, there's some around still, G1YGY.
Some on satellites, but it's high speed packet.
Yeah,
So
G1YGY runs some still. It's still around.
What frequency is it on?
144.800, 144.800.
No. That's APRS.
That's APRS, is it? Sorry.
But it's using packet.
Yeah, it's somewhere around that area,
So APRS is actually using packet
It's using packet.
frequencies, is it?
Yeah, which is
But it's using packet.
Using packet, but it's just reporting positions. Anybody else?
There is actually some functionality in JS8 called APRS.
Oh, right.
I'm not quite sure exactly what it does, but its functionality is in there.
One thing you didn't mention was timing. You mentioned timing, but you didn't mention things for setting your PC time right.
Okay, so there's a number that you can use.
Yeah.
You could use time.
Sorry, what we're saying is to get to start at the time slot at the right time. Your computer clock needs to be fairly accurate, otherwise it goes all awry.
Yeah, there's a number. You can either use the web page time.is, but you don't find that reliable, or you use one of the free downloaders as Dimension 4.
Dimension 4, somebody told me they'd stop doing. I saw something here. If you've got it, it's still there, but I understand.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've got
Mindberg's
You use something different, don't you?
I'm using Mindberg.
Mindberg,
Yeah.
yeah.
It reports that I've got a delay of 49 milliseconds through my PC, and I'm usually about 100 milliseconds off the average.
Yeah. But it is important, if your PC clock's accurate, it's not a problem. And trying to just use Windows time is not always good enough.
Windows time, it doesn't work.
No.
It doesn't work. Well, apart from anything else, it normally only updates once a week, unless you tell it otherwise. So you really need an external time source to compare it with.
Is Windows good at anything? No. That's it.
Frustrating you?
Bank ATMs, that's it. It's cheap.
I saw one of those blue screens.
Yeah. Okay, any other
Yeah,
questions?
just one comment really. Those digital modes, particularly the JS8, it's hard to read. I should add that with all of them, you can go in and change the font type and the size of it, both on the buttons and the receive and transmitting.
There's all sorts you can do with it, isn't there? There's that much you can do with
Probably
it.
done that, shouldn't I?
With my eyes now, I find that,
Yeah.
particularly on JS8, you need to go in and change it.
Yeah, okay. But I can't see it. I mean, it's obviously very popular, but I mean, I've had one QSO so far, and I was like, oh, is that it?
JS8 is very popular in the US, seems less so in Europe.
Yeah, okay.
You can
So
see it
you
from the other side of the room.
set it to just transmit when you're not sat there?
Yes.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
right.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
You can
right.
set it to answer CQ calls,
Oh,
can't
I see, right.
Oh, yeah.
Come back and find you work.
you? Oh, yeah, you go and have a cup of tea and work 5 people. If it takes a long
There's
automatically.
one guy wrote a script for it and left it on all night, and he worked 120 countries while he was
Wow, oh, right.
Did he do it? He didn't do it, did he?
Oh, automated.
So what you're saying is,
No.
can you be
If you
on
want it, I know where it
competition?
is.
Can you be in a competition and be in bed at the same time?
I don't think you can do contests yet.
With the new version, there'll be no reason
You'll
why
be
you
able
can't
to,
do
but at
that.
the moment you can't do contests.
That'd be good, that.
Yeah, so you can actually
Just
sit
think of all those hours I spent at the weekend.
Dead.
Yes, I
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks, Viv, that's great, because it's one of those weaknesses of life, FT8.
do. Please continue that.
Just do that.